Hey guys, it's Kelly here with Good Dogs Minnesota. And first of all, I want to apologize that I have a cold and it's killing me. So I hope I can get through this uh, without hacking up and blowing up the mic on my laptop here. Cool. Well, thanks for joining me. Thanks for catching it live or catching it on the replay. My name is Kelly Zink, and I am a dog trainer in Minnesota. We are in Rogers, Minnesota, which is just northwest of the Twin Cities, and we serve the Twin Cities and West Metro. This is, I believe, installment 4 of Manic, Mutt Mondays. So we're hanging out here, going to do our weekly live Q&A. Again, I have a cold, got my Monday beer, which is what I typically do every Monday when I get done working with on a busy Monday. And I'm sorry I'm a little late, and I don't have a really plan for discussion, although I got suggested to talk about teenage dogs, so I think I'm going to go with that. I apologize for not having a laid out plan. I've been really, really busy this week. I'm heading to New York in 4 days, trying to get everything done before then, and crammed all of my clients into the 3 or 4 days before I leave. So it's been a little bit busy here. Excuse me. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about teenage dogs. And if you have any questions in the meantime, whether it be about teenage dogs or anything else, go ahead and ask. I might not answer it right away as you after you answer the question, but I will go back through and take a look at the questions and see if I can answer anything for you. All right. So teenage dogs. What is a teenage dog? Typically, depending on the breed, we're looking at anywhere between 6 months and 2 years old. Larger breeds take longer to mature. Larger breeds tend to stay roly-poly type looking puppies for longer. A 6-month-old Mastiff per se is definitely still growing and going to add a pack on the pounds, whereas let's say a 6-month-old Yorkshire Terrier is probably as big as they're going to get. So with our smaller dogs, we tend to see them mature a lot faster. So a year-old, again, Yorkshire Terrier, one of the companion breeds, is going to look and act a lot more like an adult dog versus a year-old Lab, Retriever, Shepherd, pretty much anything in that area, any working dog or hunting dog. Teenage dogs are probably one of the biggest issues that we have as dog trainers. Most of our dogs that we get called for are teenage dogs. And right now, I believe the statistic still stands that I think it's like 80% of the dogs in rescues and shelters are between the ages of 6 months and a year and a half old. So that's a lot of teenage dogs. And teenage dogs are really hard. There's a reason for that. People want to get the puppy, and they get the roly-poly puppy, and they love that puppy. And we talked about puppies last week. Most of the time people don't give that puppy a lot of freedom and a lot of love and cuddles, and fail to guide that puppy and teach that puppy what it is that they want them to do, fail to establish that routine, and then we have a crazy teenage dog. And just like any other teenager, they're a little bit rebellious, right? You say, nope, don't do that. And they say, no, I'm going to do that anyway. And when you try to stop me, I'm going to chew on my leash. And if you don't pay attention to me, I'm going to bark at you. And everything you taught me as a puppy, if you did take the time to teach your puppy stuff, they seem to forget when they get into that teenage years. So typically, I call a teenage dog, again, we'll go with age. It really depends on the breed. But I say about 8 or 9 months, you're starting to get into those teenage years, I would say. And I will definitely say that depending on the dog, some dogs mature a little bit faster again than others, not just breed, but individual as well. So I think the biggest issues that we have with teenage dogs, at least that I see, are jumping, greeting too excitedly, running away, not doing any sort of, they have commands. A lot of times people say, well, we're working on sit, or the dog sits but with a treat in their hand. If the dog knows they have food, they'll sit for food, but the dog has any type of duration at all. And they're destructive. Teenage dogs are extremely destructive. That's probably the biggest one. Oftentimes too, if you've had any sort of issues as puppies, whenever somebody calls me, let's say because their teenage dog is maybe now growling at children or has been chasing cats, right? They have a cat, all of a sudden they were fine with the cat as a puppy, but now they're chasing the cat. Typically we saw it as puppies, but we don't see it. But now as an adult or as a teenager, these behaviors are coming out and becoming much, much more a nuisance, right? And it was never established when they were younger to, the routine. We never set the expectation when they're younger. And now as teenagers, they're like, woohoo, I can do whatever I want. Life is great. And oftentimes that's when we want to establish rules, is when they're teenagers, which it's a lot harder to establish rules with a teenager than it is with a younger dog or child, for that matter, or child. If you can imagine, letting your kids do whatever they want until they were 13 years old, and then all of a sudden trying to establish rules and boundaries, you're going to have a mutiny on your hands, man. So how do we deal with teenage dogs? I think one of the biggest things that we see when they're teenagers is we see an increase in drive, right? So roly-poly puppies, they tend to sleep a lot, and they tend to, you kind of have that on your side that with a young pup, they'll just kind of fall asleep wherever they are. Hi, Elizabeth. I'm waving back. They tend to fall asleep wherever they are. So you get like that break for yourself. You're like, oh, the puppy's sleeping, and the puppy's going to get up, and he's going to go do this, this, and this. Teenage dogs, we tend to see an increase in energy, and they need less sleep. So they're not really taking that nice long nap, and they're not necessarily falling asleep wherever they are. They actually need to be put down for a nap, so to speak, right? So with your teenage dog, really good idea, put them down for a nap every afternoon for about 2 hours in the kennel, even if you're home. I can't stress that enough. Teenage dogs also need a ton of sleep, just like puppies, not as much as puppies, but they need more sleep than just sleeping at night. And with teenage dogs, when that drive increases, there's a lot going on hormonally up here in the brain, and they can't necessarily calm down where they're at. And if they don't get that sleep, you're going to see a really, really crabby dog later, which is a dog that's going to be very non-compliant with anything, be very easily frustrated, very easily irritated, and they're also going to go through what we call, not really sure, I think at about 12 weeks, dogs tend to, and maybe earlier, but between the time of 5 p.m. and 7 p.m., they tend to just go crazy. I didn't talk about it last time. We call it the witching hour with puppies. They tend to just get really nuts and really sassy and really, it's almost like they're overtired. And this can especially be true if you have a teenage dog that's not sleeping very well. So with a teenager, the schedule for me is wake up, you work, right? Teenagers should be potty trained, by the way. 6 months old, they should. If you've been working since they were puppies, they should be potty trained. If you guys have potty training questions for older dogs, let me know. But typically, they should be potty trained at that point. There's usually to a point about a year where there's a gray area where I'll say that dogs might have accidents if the schedule changes suddenly, or you might leave them alone for a little too long, but typically speaking, they shouldn't. I think every once in a while a dog maybe at like 8 months will go through a phase where they just pee in the house randomly for a little while. But typically speaking, they should be potty trained. But the schedule should be, we wake up in the morning, we do something. So you're doing something active with your dog, right? Walking, training, jogging. They want to wake up and they want to go. Go, 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 go. So for us at home, in our house, we wake up and we do something with our dogs. I wake up, we feed probably about, depending on what we're doing, I feed about half of their normal food that they would get in the morning. go potty, we run around for a little bit, go back in the kennels, I take my kid to school, and I come home, and then it's dog time until about 1 o'clock, meaning that I'm working each dog on individual things that we're working on, and we're playing, and then they go in their kennels for probably about 3 hours while I do my thing, my stuff, whether that's errands or cleaning, or I just have some me time. And then they get out of the kennels, and we do that again. Not as for long, but I'll take them out for like an hour. I might work on some things. And then they go back in the kennels again for about 2 more hours when I go get my kid, and I come home and I start dinner. And then we have an evening shift of the same thing, and then everybody goes to bed. But in that afternoon time, sometimes it's 4 hours that they're sleeping, that they're in their kennels not doing anything. That is a very important 4 hours. They are resting, they're getting sleep, they're working on impulse control. Sometimes they're in place, so they're working on impulse control. And they're not bothered, and they're learning to just exist in the house while other things are going on around them, which is incredibly hard for teenage dogs. Typically, they want to be involved in every little thing that's going on in the house. Every little thing that you're doing, they're right there. What is going on? What is going on? What is going on? Right? That's getting them, A, that's going to get them into trouble. They're going to make bad choices. B, it's going to build up a habit of, I have to be where everybody is. I have to be doing something. I have to be involved in whatever's going on. Which, that's when we see the dog that when they're not allowed to be involved, we're seeing them bark incessantly and get frustrated and get destructive, right? Is a dog that's not practiced in just chilling and being calm and quiet while the world is existing around them, which is the same dog that we take out in public. They're at the end of the leash going crazy and just really overstimulated by everything that's going on because they're so used to just being involved in everything, right? Elizabeth asked, what age did you consider a teenager? We did mention that earlier. It depends on the breed. So for Thor, who's a Mastiff, you're looking at, I would say about, again, it's down to individuals, but you're probably going to start seeing the rambunctiousness, teenage, I'll call it crappiness, for lack of a better word, at about 9 months. Maybe it'd be the earliest, up until probably about 2 years, and even then you might see stuff probably like 2.5 years. I think for a Mastiff, mature, like able to be freedom at liberty, where you can actually see that he's like an adult dog, probably about 3 years that you'd see that. So for him, probably that year between 1 and 2 years old, or excuse me, 1 and 2 years old. And then at 2, he'll probably be pretty chill, but you'll notice it at about 2 when he's around little puppies, if he's around younger dogs, that he's actually chilled out a lot. But you might see some sassiness till about 3 years old. Yeah, Elizabeth says till 4 sometimes. Absolutely. It really depends on the dog. And it really depends on their habits as puppies. Typically speaking, if you establish really good habits when they're young, you'll still see like some sassiness and a lot of play up until that point, but you shouldn't see like really resistant, really some of the crappy stuff that we get called for. You'll see a lot of play. You'll see a lot of, I'm not going to do that. Might see a dog that tries to divert your attention into being playful instead of actually having to do whatever it is you ask him to do. Which for me, that's not so bad. But I would say, 3 or 4. And it really depends. It depends on the dog individually. Again, larger dogs tend to take longer to mature. I know for Hogarth, he's 2, and I definitely think he's still very young, where I wouldn't necessarily trust him. Like, he's not able to go out into the field and do his training without a lot of guidance right now, versus when he's 3, I would hope that I can just send him out and he can go do his thing and do his job and come back and be mature enough to make all those decisions on his own. Right now, I don't think he's ready for that. However, at 2, he's pretty much freedom at liberty in the house. And I just have to watch to make sure that I'm providing him with a lot of exercise and things to do, or he will stop, or he will kind of revert back into that crappy teenager and just not listen, if that makes sense. So again, I'm just gonna go back. Sorry, guys, this is really impromptu. I didn't really plan. I think the big thing too is one of the biggest things is jumping and be really rambunctious when people come over, which is a question that got asked a few weeks ago about jumping. Here's what happens, guys, is like when we have puppies, we call people over to come see our puppy. And because we want to socialize, because we're told to have the dog say hello to everybody constantly, which is not how we should be socializing puppies, by the way. But we think that we're doing our puppy a favor by having them go say hi to everybody, right? So we walk in the door and we go, oh my gosh, it's a puppy. And we get really high-pitched voice and we get very excited. And the puppy comes running up and we go, oh, yay, so much fun. And the puppy jumps on us, right? Or the puppy gets really excited, pees. We get down on the floor with them. We get in their face. And we're just teaching our dog that you get really excited. You should get really excited when people come over because it's freaking awesome. It's just awesome when people come over. So get really excited. And then our dog becomes 6 months old, 7 months old, and is bigger, stronger, and has much more intensity. And then we start correcting the dog, right? We start being like, no, knock it off. Bad dog. Which is not fair because all that dog did was grow up. It get bigger. That's all it did. Right? We're the ones that created that situation. So number one, if you have an issue with greeting, the first thing we need to do is we need to establish a completely different pattern of behavior when people come over. Number one. So number one, the rule, when people come over, they ignore your dog. No matter what the dog's doing. They need to ignore your dog no matter what you're doing. They need to just let you deal with your dog and ignore your dog and wait till that dog is calm calm enough that you know that if they go say hi, they're probably not going to jump and go too crazy. And when we do say hi to dogs, it should be, hey, how you doing, bud? Little pet if they want that, and then go on with your visit. The dog is not the center of attention. The dog does not need to be, trying to think of a nice way to say it. Okay, here's a better way to say it. I don't want to swear and be all lewd, but the dog doesn't need to think that you're there to see him. And oftentimes, because of that really excited introduction that we give as puppies, our dogs can learn to think that I have to act this way in order to create the interaction that I want. Right? It's the same thing we talk about with the leash. I have to put tension on the leash and pull in order to get where I need to go. So I have to get crazy and jump and get in somebody's face in order to get that interaction that I'm looking for. So we need to change that. And oftentimes when we just ignore it, we actually might see the behavior increase a little bit and get more intense for a while. It's called instinction, meaning that I do this and it worked, and then it stopped working, I need to do it more. It's kind of a natural behavior. We do the same thing if you ever at the elevator when you push the button. And you push the button, elevator door opens, you push the button, elevator door opens, and then it doesn't work, and you kind of instinctually want to push that button a few more times, right? We do the same thing. We call it an extinction burst. Is an attempt to create the same outcome as that behavior previously created. If that makes sense. So ignoring doesn't always, ignoring will work down the road, right? You have to be committed to ignoring, which is the hard part. And it's easy to control yourself. It's not easy to control other people. And a lot of times people say, it's okay, I love dogs. Just let them jump all over me, which doesn't help you or the dog in the long run. And jumping is a big issue. I had a client that had a Rottweiler about 6 or 7 months old that had jumped on the grandmother, the family with 2 kids, and the grandmother jumped on the grandmother. Grandmother fell and got really hurt and had to have surgery, and it created this whole big long chain of events for her health-wise. just because she came over to see the grandkids, and this dog, who was a really nice dog, but he's very intense, jumped and knocked her over. And excuse me, at the same house, the kids said that, I asked the kids if they jump on him, or if the dog jumps on them, and they said yeah, and they pull up their shirt, and the kids have scratch marks all over them from this dog just jumping, just being really excited and not knowing how to handle themselves. So what we did in that situation, what I suggest everybody does, is number one, is start ignoring that dog when he's really excited. And by ignore, I mean really, really ignore, right? If you can ignore, put them in their kennel. Put them away when people come over. If you can't practice and practice correctly, or if you have a family member that comes over that you know is not going to listen, because they're out there, I have them too, I put the dog away. Just put the dog in the kennel. Then you don't even have to worry about it. What really helps too with the greeting as far as the doorway is actually establishing a space, what we call a border, an invisible border, where for us it's a hallway. So if somebody comes into our house, our dogs actually have to back up to a spot in the house. They're not allowed to be in the doorway or by the doorway at all. And that's really effective because I only have to tell my dog to stay there, and I can reward for them staying there versus tell them not to do something. Anytime I can create a situation where I can tell my dog to do something versus not do something is a really good thing. Not that we shouldn't correct if they come forward, right, or establish that, no, you can't do that. But if I can take all that energy and put it into something else, like back up and wait, good job, lay down, good, sit, good, look at me, good. We're taking all that energy and we're focusing it somewhere else, is really, really effective. It's a lot easier to tell a dog, hey, you can't move forward, than tell a dog, hey, you can't jump, right? If jumping is a huge, huge problem to the point where it's really causing some problems, like with my client, we did all that stuff, but we also had to go a corrective route where we did correct the dog for jumping, right? Typically speaking, when I say ignore the dog, a lot of people don't know how to ignore a dog when they're jumping, right? Ignoring the dog, if the dog is jumping on you, right, is not moving away from the dog, is not turning your body from the dog, right? Ignoring literally means turn into a statue and do not move at all, no matter what. Right? That's what ignoring means. And I can definitely tell you that when I go into somebody's house, based on my reaction, the dog doesn't get really that jumpy and the dog doesn't get that excited. And I think clients sometimes I'll walk into a house and I know the dog is jumping because they expressed that was an issue for them. And I walk into the house prepared that the dog is going to jump. And I literally ignore that dog. I do not move. I do not look down. I do not engage that dog. I pretend that dog does not exist. And I tell the owner, don't worry about it. Because they're grabbing at leashes. They're trying to pull the dog back, which all of that touching intention is just adding to the excitement. And within literally 15 seconds, 20 seconds, that dog has kind of walked away and done his own thing. Because he didn't get any reinforcement whatsoever from the interaction at the doorway. Right? And as soon as he walks away and chills out, then I can be like, hey, bud, what's up? Maybe attempt to pet or touch, depending on the dog, if I think that he's not going to get too excited again. The other thing about helping the dog succeed is that when you're out in public with your dog, don't allow everybody to come up and pet and touch your dog. It's your dog. They don't need to be petting and touching your dog. It's also not really helpful if they go outside, go for a walk, go to Petco, go out into the world, and every person out in the world is treating them as if they were amazingly awesome, and that they come in and be in their space and be like, oh my gosh, you're the greatest thing ever. I've seen all day. I just have to pet you. I love dogs. And then at home, you're like, oh no, don't do that. Don't go over to that person. Leave that person alone. Right? It doesn't make sense to the dog. So I always suggest, I suggest it for every client because I would like to see a world where dogs are able to go everywhere with us. I think particularly for teenage dogs, the more that they're out of the house and the more they experience, the more information that they're given, novel information, the calmer and more well-behaved they are, right? The problem is that they are kind of crazy and we don't provide an environment, us as a society and us as dog owners, fail to provide a lot of times them with an environment that allows them to be successful and allows them to go out and experience things without reinforcing negative behavior. So our dogs are crazy, we can't take them out because they're crazy when we take them out, so they're stuck inside, which only perpetuates the cycle of overstimulation and overexcitement, and doorbell rings, somebody comes in, and there's just an explosion of chaos because they're just so pent up with everything. Yeah, so that's my issue with that. I think it's there's places in France that I think it's interesting where there's a lot of dogs, and there's a lot of dogs off leash, and dogs are pretty much allowed almost everywhere in public, yet it's very, very rude to engage with somebody else's dog. It's very, very rude to talk to somebody else's dog. It's like somebody were to like go up and pet your kid, you know, like it's just, it's an interesting contrast because there they don't have the problems that we have. They don't have a lot of dogs that are barking, lunging at people, that are jumping on people. They're not seeing nearly the kind of behavioral issues that we are seeing that are based on dogs that are under-exercised, overstimulated, or in my case, I would say it's almost that they're understimulated, so that they're just so wild and they see something new, they don't even know how to handle it. If that makes sense. Sorry, I've got some phone issues buzzing going on here. Monday beer. It's the greatest beer of the week. It's the only beer of the week these days. Which brings me to the next thing about teenage dogs. Play is really, really important. You should be playing with your dogs. But you should be playing in a way that is productive, right? Which means that the play is providing the dog with something, right? So I love tug. Tug is great. Flirt poles are great. Spring poles are great. Weight pull and things like that, which is not really play, but it does provide biological fulfillment. And I think I can just talk about biological fulfillment because that play is biological fulfillment. So biological fulfillment is exactly what it sounds like, is the dog's natural instincts for doing certain behaviors being satisfied. And when we biologically fulfill dogs, we see very healthy, well-adjusted dogs. Biological fulfillment can be play. So a lot of times we have a lot of pit bull breeds, and not just pit bulls, but we got, labs, these young dogs that need to wrestle. They need to bite things. Malinois shepherds also, they need to bite things. They need to wrestle things. They need to pull and tear and crush. Some of those pitties just like to crush things. We need to provide them with outlets for that. We can't just say, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And then we can't not provide them with outlets and then yell at them when the doorbell rings, and that's the most exciting thing that happens to them for them all day, and then they're going crazy. They're not ready to handle that. So we need to provide them with biological outlets. And each dog has a different biological outlet, I think. It really depends on the dog. I think tug is a great thing. It satisfies what you would refer to. It satisfies that kind of need for conflict. Dogs like conflict, guys. They enjoy it. I don't know if you ever played with a dog, and I know my dogs particularly, they like when I start talking trash to them, and I mean, you're a bad dog. Come here, you bad dog. And he just gets all really like, oh yeah, I'm a bad dog. They enjoy that conflict. It's kind of the same things how we, children play cops and robbers, so to speak, or, we play tag. We play games that are based in conflict, right? We play games that are based basically, if I dare say it, in hunting, right? What do you think tag is? Catch me, right? And we play those games for a reason because it satisfies biological fulfillment. We play hide and seek for a reason. It satisfies a certain biological fulfillment. So providing these with our dogs is really, really important. Flirt poles are great, which is basically a cat toy for dogs, right? And it provides that chase, that stalk. Hiking. If you guys are doing long walks with your dog, walk is a really good biological fulfillment. particularly off-leash hiking is great for, I think I'm having internet issues. Hold on. I'm going to take this off of Wi-Fi. Might help. Oops. And we see, as dog trainers, we see a lot of lack of biological fulfillment, right? We don't see dogs that are getting out on a regular basis other than maybe for a walk around the block. We don't see dogs that are engaging in any sort of like a search, scent work and search, working for their food in any way. So they get very bored and they get pent up with a lot of energy. And then when we add a crappy diet with a lot of sugar and carbs in it, we're only adding to that energy. We're only adding to that excitement. We're adding to that. We're only sugar fueling a hyper kid, basically. So we see a lot of issues that run with that. I think one thing that's really important with the younger dogs, with the teenage dogs, is you've got to start getting them out in public, right? Got to establish, number one is what we refer to as engagement. You need to work on keeping the dog's attention. Not just keeping the dog's attention, but the dog, we call it the rule of 51%. So no matter what's going on around you, the dog has 51% of their attention on you. Keeping attention, like we work on focus stuff, that's more of a trick value thing than it is anything else. We use it just like we use obedience cues to get the dog practiced so that the dog will default to that behavior. Then we can reward it. So we see that behavior all the time. But really we're asking our dogs to be attentive, right? Just because there's another dog down the street doesn't mean you still need to be attentive with me and do whatever it is that I'm asking you to do, even though there's something cool going on. And I think that we do fail a lot at that as dog owners. And the reason why we fail is because we kind of want our dogs to do all these things, but yet we don't provide them with biological fulfilling activities, right? So we become actually pretty boring. And I am shocked sometimes at how much people want out of their dogs, but yet when they fill out the form, they're not going out of the house at all with their dog, and they're not taking the dog anywhere. They're not, the play is, well, the dog runs around in the backyard and that's it, So we need to do that both ways, right? Biological fulfillment, we did jumping and excitement. Chewing, that's a big one I think people have a hard time with. Again, most of the reasons why I get called is from issues of too much freedom too soon. So if you've got issues, dogs should be in the kennel. Plain and simple, right? Too much freedom too soon. With dogs that are under 3 years old, or new dogs in your house, it's all about quality versus quantity of time you're spending with your dog. So if you're spending 3 hours a day with your dog, let's say you got 3 hours a day to spend with your dog, and you're making that 3 hours super, super quality time, it is better than spending 24 hours with your dog that nothing is going on, that there's no quality in those interactions, that the dog is just sleeping and hanging out, getting his food for nothing, maybe playing outside in the backyard or pulling you down the street on a leash. Like, that's not quality. That's not good quality time with your dog, right? It is much better to spend quality time with your dog and not as much time with your dog than it is to spend a ton of time. I can definitely attest that I've hung out with some sporting guys, and their dogs are kenneled all the time, whether they're usually in a kennel run of some sort, but they're not with their dogs 24/7. They're with their dogs maybe a few hours a day, and those dogs are so in tune with those guys and so ready to work and so into those guys. It was all men that I worked with. I didn't work with any girls. So, but it's shocking that they only spend like a few hours a day with their dog, and those dogs will do anything for them. It's all about the quality of the time that you spend with your dog. Again, too much freedom too soon. Dog is chewing. Dog shouldn't be out alone being able to chew. Dogs should be in the kennel, even if there's stuff going on. Again, one of the biggest issues we have is dogs that need to be involved with everything. They get really, really excited and they have to go see what's going on with everything. And then when we say, nope, you can't, we get anxiety and incessant barking and whining and throwing tantrums, right? And it's not throwing tantrums because they're brats. It's throwing tantrums because all of a sudden they don't have, they're being pulled away from something they get to do most of the time, right? They're having to adjust to things going on around them without them being involved, which is hard for them. So tons of impulse control, which we talked about with puppies. Impulse control is a huge thing. And we carry that on into the teenage years. A lot of people too, I think a big mistake that people make, and we talked about it a little bit last week, but they don't actually start training the dog until there's problems, right? So they're not very proactive in how am I going to prevent A, B, C, and D. Instead, they kind of just wait until A, B, C, and D happens, and then we decide we're going to start training the dog, which is really, it's hard. It does create one of those situations where you're going to have to put it on the calendar. Today I'm going to change things, and you have to change yourself. You have to change your routine. You have to change parts of your life in order to fix it, right? And in rescue, if you're getting that dog, even if you bring home a teenage dog, you can establish things really, really quickly and clearly for that dog right away by being proactive. That is something that's huge. Hey, Sarah, is huge. I have a Malinois here that's a foster, and she just got her second heartworm shot. And when we were at the vet, they started asking me about her anxiety and her separation anxiety, and I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And they showed me her chart, and apparently she, at her previous foster, was breaking out of her crate, was rolling her crate, like moving her crate while she was inside it from one end of the room to the other. And she had separation anxiety. She was biting because she was anxious, like freaking out and pulling on clothes. And she was having, they said what they would call tantrums, which I could see it in her. And, I'd like to say that when she graced the threshold of our house that we didn't see any of that, but I did the first week. The first week I put her in the kennel and she did cartwheels in it. It's crazy. But I just figured that she was in a new place and she was freaking out, which that's what happens. And I saw really quick that she was a Malinois, which is a dog that's prone to being very hyped up and very, if not given proper outlets, very, very anxious dogs. And they're prone to be very handler oriented. So yes, that separation, they get very worried if they're not with their handler. And she's fine. She doesn't break out of her kennel. She doesn't go crazy when I leave the room. She doesn't do any of that stuff. And the reason is because we just dealt with it when it happened. I said, wow, she's kind of crazy in her kennel. So I'm going to address it right now. And within days, she was fine. And she's been fine. And I didn't know it. Now that I didn't know it at the time. And now that I realize, I read her chart and I was like, holy moly. We didn't see any of that. And the reason why wasn't because I'm some great trainer that put the magic training sprinkle on her. I just addressed it. What I saw, what I didn't like, I disagreed with, and I addressed it, right? And I just was proactive with a lot of things that I saw, ooh, I don't really like that kind of excitement. So I'm going to address it, and then I'm going to be proactive to prevent that, and prevent her from getting rewarded for that. And she's other than being kind of jacked up on the meds that she's on, she's very good, and we don't see a lot of that behavior. So, and it's just an example of how your behavior and how you treat the dog and what you allow the dog to be rewarded with can greatly, greatly affect the dog. Greatly affect the dog. They will change according to their environment. So something to keep in mind. Be proactive. Be proactive. With young dogs, I don't like dogs, and this is another question I get all the time with dogs on the furniture or on the bed. I'm torn. I have to say, I don't like young dogs on the furniture. I think that can create scenarios where the dogs can make bad choices. For example, if you allow your dog on the furniture, my rule is that a guest should be able to walk into your house and sit down on your couch and not be assaulted by a dog. That if your dog can handle that, or at least is place trained enough that when your guest walks in, you can say, nope, off the couch, go to place, and you lay over there, and your guest can sit down on the couch and not be assaulted, that's fine. But typically speaking, I don't like young dogs on the furniture because they are so crazy, and they will assault your guests, which we already talked about, right? And I don't think it's fair for somebody to say, oh, I'm not going to sit on the couch because the dog is going crazy. That just tells the dog that I own this couch. And I can do whatever I want with this couch, right? I don't think that's appropriate either. So, and the same thing with the bed. I prefer dogs to live a good 2 or 3 years without being on any furniture at all, and then saying, you know what, you're doing really well here, come on the couch, right? Good job. The other reason is that what can happen if young dogs are on the furniture, if you start that early, excuse me, I do chapstick, man. It got really dry here. What can happen with young dogs on the furniture is that they can start actually getting really, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say imprinting, right? Just like dogs can get really relaxed when they go in their kennel. If you kennel train properly, the minute that dog's in the kennel, they should just relax and be chill. The same thing can happen with the couch. And what can happen is that if the dog, let's say you have people over, or one day you're sick and you just want to lay on the couch and you don't want the dog on the couch with you, or there's too many people over at your house and the dog can't be on the couch, you get a dog that gets very uneasy and paces around, can't settle, right? Because they're only used to settling on the couch instead of settling on the floor or settling on place. So I prefer that a dog is very, very able independently to settle on the floor and chill and sleep on the floor for a few hours before I'm allowing them to get on the couch. Because I always want to be able to be like, get off the couch. And they're like, okay, I'm going to go lay on my floor, in my spot on my floor, or my bed, or my place, or whatever. And they're okay with that. I don't want to see a dog that can't relax without being in the one spot that they're able to relax, if that makes sense. As far as dogs on the bed, I prefer dogs, at least for the first 2 years, to be in their kennels at night. At least 1.5 years for sure. Whether that's in your room or not in your room, I don't care. And as far as being on your bed, I don't think that you should necessarily be sleeping with your dog every night. I think dogs, again, they need to learn how to relax and sleep on the floor and be okay with relaxing and, sleeping on the floor, and sleeping in their kennels. So if you happen to leave in the middle of the night because you have an emergency, you should be able to put your dog in the kennel, and that's okay. I did have a client that had a pit bull mix that they had slept in the bed with her since they got her, and they got her like 7 weeks old. And when she was, I think, 3, they got called in the middle of the night because the wife's dad had a heart attack. So they had to get up in the middle of the night and leave and catch a plane and have somebody come grab the dog. And so they left, very much in a hurry. They got up, they left the dog in the middle of the night, and the person that they had, a neighbor, come over to pick up the dog, found a completely ransacked bedroom because the dog just just couldn't handle just all of a sudden being left alone in the middle of the night, and if the dog was kennel trained, it wouldn't have happened. That dog had separation anxiety now every single night, had an anxious spell because of that. So something, again, being proactive, because you never really know what can happen that can create those problems. So having a backup is really, really important. I just personally don't prefer dogs on my own bed because I don't sleep well with the dog on the bed. I used to. When I was younger, my first dogs that I had independently, I slept on the bed with them. And then after those dogs were gone, I spent about a year without a dog. And then the next dog I got was Marley, my Pekingese, and he didn't have any interest in being on the bed with me at all. He wanted to be in his kennel. And I just got, I realized how much I wasn't sleeping very well. I thought I was. I thought I had this all, that it was great and wonderful to sleep with my dog. And now I'm like, no way. No way. And I also noticed how much cleaner my bed is and my couch is without my dog on it all the time. But that's just me. Again, those are my rules with dogs on the couch, and I prefer that you don't let your teenage dogs do things that are going to get them into trouble, which is a lot of things, to be honest. It's a lot of things. I did too want to touch on dog class. A lot of people, again, they start training when the dog's a teenager, and they'll want to go to dog class. Ooh, I got something I want to talk about. I'm going to put a pin in that, though. Let me write it down. I think it's great to take your dog to a group class. And I think everybody should do something to the regard of a group class with their younger dogs. Number one, if anything, even if your dog knows everything there is to know in that class, you are going out every day with your dog, and you are working that dog with a class of other dogs, with a group of other dogs. You're not going to get that. You don't have that ability at home, right? And the more that your dog is used to paying attention to you and doing what you ask in a room full of dogs, they're going to be able to do what you ask them to do anywhere. That's when you're walking down the street and there's some crazy dog barking and lunging, it's going to be a lot easier to get control over your dog and maintain your dog's focus because they've already been practicing that. And I will tell you, as somebody who's taught a lot of group classes, that I oftentimes somebody will tell me, oh, my dog knows all this stuff. Oh, my dog knows all this stuff. And I say, great. I can't wait to meet your dog next week. And we'll see. I have all a bunch of stuff that you can do. This, that's way more advanced. And the dog gets there, and it's very, very apparent that the dog never really has done any behaviors outside of the house whatsoever. So the dog gets there and completely cannot function because he's just so overstimulated. And overwhelmed by all the other dogs in the room, so perfect. And then the people are very embarrassed, and I have to say, oh, no, I totally believe you. I understand. That's why you're here, right? So I think dog class is really, really important. However, I do want to stress that dog classes really have a high failure rate, meaning that not necessarily that your dog's not going to graduate, right? But in dog class, you're not going to once a week class is not going to give your dog everything that they need to learn. So I highly suggest, and honestly, and I don't mean to sound like an advertisement, but I highly suggest everybody who has a dog get a trainer. At least, what? A dog class now is like $150, should be a good one, maybe $200. Spend $400 and get a trainer into your house for a few sessions. It will help you so much. Again, being proactive, right? And preventing issues down the road. I don't mean to of course I'm a dog trainer and I want to be in everybody's house and it's how I make a living, but so many times I've heard oh my gosh, I'm so glad I asked you that question. Oh my gosh, I would have done something different and it would have, it could have ended poorly, with long-term consequences. So if you can't get a hold of a trainer to ask questions, it's so much better just to get a dog in your house. Even before you bring a dog home. So helpful. Dog parks. I've talked about dog parks before. They're not my favorite thing. And here's my rule, especially people with younger dogs, if you go to the dog park, your dog needs to be able to recall away from dogs if you call them. That means that if you call your dog, they need to come when they're called, even if they're playing with another dog. And if they can't, you shouldn't be at the dog park. We talk about engagement. We talk about our dogs, wanting our dogs to pay attention to us. Usually with like a young dog that's 6 months old, you take them to the dog park. They're social and they love other dogs. All you're teaching them is that other dogs are way more fun than you are. And that when you call them, they're going to have to leave the dog park, and they love the dog park, right? I like to go to the dog park and work outside the dog park, work my dog around other dogs playing, work on that engagement. And if they do a great job, and if there's dog park looks okay to me, I might let them in the dog park for a little bit to play, but it really depends. The dog parks can be very dangerous places. I mean, it's hard because we as trainers, we're very jaded. Nobody calls me and says, hey, I took my dog to the dog park today and had a great experience. So they usually call and say that something awful happened at the dog park. And us being dog trainers, we see different things than maybe somebody who's not knowledgeable about dog behavior. I see a lot of uncomfortable dogs at the dog park. I see a lot of dogs that are actually kind of jerk-offs out there being allowed to be jerks. I know that a lot of dogs don't know how to take a correction from another dog, and they don't know what no means from another dog. And even if you have a great dog park dog, that dog that doesn't get into problems, that doesn't get into anything heavy, can look at other dogs and be like, yeah, I don't want to play with them, I'm going to go over here. Some dogs are really dog park savvy and have a great time at the dog park. There's still a risk of a dog just coming out of nowhere and attacking your dog. Not a big risk. I'm not going to say, it's bound to happen, but it could. And that's pretty scary. So I think that when you've dealt with one dog fight at the dog park, you just don't ever want to go again. But I don't want a bunch of young dogs that have no social experiences, that don't have any inkling to even pay attention to their owners or take guidance or direction from their owners when they're around other dogs, to be at the dog park. So that's my stick on dog parks. Everybody goes. I realize it's like a culture. But I don't advise it unless you think that your dog is really, really that dog savvy, and really can recall when it's supposed to. That doesn't say that I don't think that you should socialize your dogs, because I think you should socialize your dogs, just don't do it at the dog park. If you can, find structured socials. And I know that there's not very many. I don't even know if there's any here at all. But structured socials are social events for dogs that are staffed. They're run. So, and generally the rule is that if a dog is saying no to another dog, the human comes in and addresses, right? So they, if another dog's saying, I don't want to play, and if a dog is saying, I don't want to play, and another dog is like, but I want to play with you, and getting snarky and snippy, human comes in, we address, we redirect, we move that dog away, right? So that the dogs can feel safe, right? And we're preventing things that happen. Structured social, the whole idea is preventing problems before it happens. At the dog park, nobody's preventing anything, and they're only addressing when shit hits the fan, right? I don't know how many times I've been at the dog park and seen a dog really being nasty and bullying another dog, and the owner's like yelling at the dog, come here, stop it, come here, damn it, and they have no control over the dog. Sarah says, I wish there were safer dog parks. Yeah. If you are going to go to a dog park, again, we shouldn't be going with our teenage dogs. But if you were going to go to the dog park, one thing to look for is trails. Look for bigger dog parks. Not like, I know Lake of the Isles here in Minnesota, that tiny little dog park. Don't go there. Don't go there. But Green Rivers in Eagle Creek in Maple Grove, that dog park is not so bad. It actually has like a mile and a half worth of trails. So, and if you go on a mellow day, you could go there and not see another dog. It is kind of nice. You just also want to be wary of disease, because there's lots of diseases at the dog park. That's why I only ever go when it's frozen. If I do go, I only go when it's frozen. And if you want to take your dog to the dog park, drive by and look. If you see a dog that you're like, ugh, I don't think so, right? Then just don't. And if you have a gut feeling, don't go. Because really, it's not liaisoned. So especially if you have a small dog, if a larger dog does try to go after your dog, there's very little that you can do about it. So keep that in mind. Sarah says, if you ever find local structured social event opportunities, should share it. Yes, I hope to do them at some point. We definitely have the space here. And finding a space, it's just a matter of me going to some seminars and actually getting more education on it, which is on my list of things to do as far as education goes. And training in some trainers, getting some other trainers involved and training up. So it's kind of a thing, you know. But it would be great, and we do definitely need them in the area, especially because we have so many rescues here, and we are the #1 rescue state in the nation, and we should absolutely be doing it, because it actually, I believe, can save lives. Because you can take some pretty aggressive dogs and get them into a structured social, and really change them and teach them that dogs are okay, and teach them, hey, you know what, you don't have to play with dogs just because they're there, and hey, we're here to help you. And they learn how to do it. And you, if you're interested in stuff like that and researching it, Chad Mackin is kind of right now the godfather of socials, and he does seminars. And I had a friend that went that had a dog that was not good with other dogs, and she went to that seminar, and now her dog can play with other dogs. She's always muzzled when she's with other dogs, just in case, but because she's a pitty mix, and she's pretty, when she does go off, she goes off really intensely. But she's actually, I have another trainer. My other friend Katie went to that too. I think she had a pit bull that went there too. But yeah, I've heard very crazy stories about people with dogs that they thought were like super aggressive, like playing with other dogs there, you know, after the third day, just playing with other dogs and having a great time. And it's really important. We need to socialize our dogs better in that way. The problem is, I think, with socialization, and it does happen, it does pertain to teenage dogs, because we do have that second fear period that happens, you know, and they can get nervous and they can get worried. And if they're not being socialized with, for lack of a better word, a balanced dog, which is a dog that's going to stop if they tell them to stop, right? Which is a dog that's going to back off and give them space when they ask for space. They can develop some really heavy issues. Most commonly, we see dogs that learn that dogs don't back off when I ask, and they actually get more intense when I ask for space. So instead, when they're on the leash and they see another dog that's a strange dog and they get worried, they're on the offensive. So it's, I'm going to get him before he gets me. And then oftentimes they start barking and go, rah! And then the person pulls them away, so they learn, I have to go crazy and bark and let the, go, I have to pop off, and then I get to be pulled away, and then I get the space that I need. So that's a problem, and we need to definitely work on that. It's a matter of funding, getting education out there. Can you post his name, the trainer for aggressive dogs? Well, the trainer for socials. There's a lot of trainers for aggressive dogs out there. I can give you, here I can post Chad Mackin, who is a dog trainer in Illinois, and he's got a ton of stuff. He's been around for a long time, like 25 years. Like he's not old, but he's been around for a long time. I just put his name out there. Look him up. He does a lot of stuff. But there's a lot of trainers that do aggressive dogs out there. So I'm one of them. I don't do aggressive dog board and trains, though. We should do an aggressive dog day probably, huh? Talk about aggression. It would be like a 4-hour Facebook Live, I think. And that's something, too, is with teenage dogs, I think, I should probably talk about this right away. We're getting to an hour now. That's what happens when you improv this whole thing and you just decide on the minute, then you start actually getting all the good ideas like at the end when nobody's listening anymore. You're welcome, Carrie. One quick, leash reactivity. I think that dogs naturally go through a spell of leash reactivity. I know mine did, and especially when they're young, they get a little worried. About 6 to 9 months, sometimes a little bit later, they just start to get more concerned about their environment. It's natural for them to get concerned about their environment. They're teenagers. They want to see what's going on, see the world. Thank you, Sarah. And I can tell you that when my dog was about 6.5, almost 7 months old, we were walking down the street and we passed a dog, and it was a Weimaraner. And I know this Weimaraner is not the best dog with other dogs, so I'm sure that he was kind of giving my dog the eyes, like the bad juju eyes. He wasn't doing anything, but I could tell he's a big male, and it was by his house. I know it was by his house too. And all of a sudden I'm walking with my dog. He's fine. He looks over. He's kind of looking at that dog, and he just popped off like, and I was like, whoa. And I know personally that he's never had a bad experience with the dog that I knew of, and I've pretty much been with him. So, and he does so, he socializes with other dogs fine. So I think that some dogs just kind of go through a phase of being leash reactive and being more reactive to other dogs. He also, at times when I did do a few play dates with him with some friends' dogs, and the dogs would come up and he'd immediately growl, and we just had to wait it out, and he would be fine. We'd make the other dogs back off, and my friends are dog trainers, so their dogs are pretty savvy. And, the dogs back off a little bit. Okay, sorry, dude. And then, by the end of the play date, he was playing and fine. But they have a natural kind of wariness about them when they're teenagers. So the best thing for you to do is actually is teach, right? So if my dog's popping off on the leash with other dogs, I got to get him around a bunch of other dogs on leash as much as possible and teach him what it is that I want him to do. Just scream at him and then avoid other dogs on leash, because that's only going to make it way worse. And then if you hear growling and things like that, understand that 99% of the time, say 90% of the time, maybe not 99, that they're just asking for space. They're overwhelmed and asking for space, right? They're not trying to go after another dog. And I see it all the time, especially, Sarah, when I was at the adoption center and a dog would come in and at another dog and they'd be like, stop it. And they would yell at the dog. I'm like, no, just call the dog away, And if the dog is growling and getting really upset, it probably doesn't trust that you're going to handle the situation. So it probably thinks it's out there on its own. And then when it does pop off, you're yelling at it. So then it's even more worked up and not really understanding what to do. So I think we need to make sure that we're patient. We need to make sure that we're looking at it from the dog's perspective, especially when we have these young dogs, because some experiences in those teenage years can really affect the rest of their lives in those certain situations, particularly when it comes to dogs and people and kids and things like that. If there is one thing to teach your young dogs, guys, and even with puppies, I'm going to wrap this up here soon. So if anybody has questions, please let me know. It can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about young dogs. We're kind of going over teenagers today, but anything. The number one thing I would teach my dogs, as far as like in the house, is patience. Being calm and waiting for things. That rushing through a doorway doesn't get you out the door. And rushing towards food doesn't get you food. And rushing towards other people doesn't get you pet. To be calm and wait. And what we call permission-based training. Meaning that if my dog sees something he wants, per se the door open, and he's got to go potty, he's going to be like, can I go potty? Please? Do I get to go out the door? Please? I'm sitting nice. I'm waiting. Right? Not just jet out the door as fast as he can. Right? That would be the one thing is patience. Because what patience also teaches your dog is in those situations where they're nervous and they're worried, they're going to look to you for permission. What do I do? How do I handle this? And then when you have that, when you have the dog's brain, you have everything. You can tell them, hey, I want you to do this. Hey, I want you to come over here. If they're too nervous being in a close, in close quarters with dogs they don't know, you got to leave. You got to just leave. Show the dog that you understand and that you'll give them space so that they look to you next time. Same thing as when it's something positive and they want it, right? One thing you guys can do as people when you see young dogs and puppies out there, if you're in Chuck and Don's, I know you guys go there. I know you're out there, and you see that puppy. And I saw one the other day. I saw a little German Shorthair puppy, which is like one of my favorite dogs. Such a cute dog. And I'm standing there in the aisle, and this puppy like saw me, and he started getting all excited. And I was like, oh God, he's so cute. And of course he's like clawing at the end of the leash, trying to get to me. And I ignored him, right? And I think that the woman with him kind of was like, maybe she doesn't like dogs. And I just ignored him, kind of looked at my thing. And I tell you though, honestly, I was like dying inside. I wanted to lay on the floor and roll around with this puppy so bad. I really did. But that would have not have helped the owner. That would have not helped the puppy in the long run. And eventually she did. She got his attention back, and he kind of sat and kind of looked over at me. Every time I moved, every time I reached out or moved, and then she'd be like, oh, and he had an experience with a stranger that he just actually got to sit, and then he got a bunch of treats from his mom, which was great. He was really excited about that. So the best thing you guys can do too with those young dogs, this was a younger puppy, but even with young dogs, is don't touch them. Don't talk to them. Leave them alone, right? Because they can experience, first of all, doesn't help them. Only teaches them bad manners with people. And even if a dog is super excited about a person, when they're young like that, when they're 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, those teenagers, they can actually start to get nervous over a situation. So like you're like, oh, hey, and you're petting them and rubbing on them. And for some reason when people pet, they don't stop petting. They just keep petting. And you can see the dog be like, yeah, okay. And they start licking. And they start kind of getting like, okay, too much, right? That can happen with young dogs. It happens with my dog, with Hogarth. When people pet him, he does want to be pet. Like, he does want to be engaged with. And when I allow him to be engaged with people and they'll pet him, and they don't stop, and I can see him like, and he doesn't really know what to do. And I call him. Usually then I'll call him away and I'll create a cutoff cue for him. But I find that really interesting psychologically. We just don't stop petting. We just kind of keep going and going and going. And that can create a lot of what we call social pressure for dogs. So it's really important too, if you do pet or if you're allowed to pet, or somebody says, do you want to pet my dog? Because I'm socializing my dog. Pet once, food, maybe give them a treat if they're working on some fear issues, and then walk away. Give the dog space. Leave that dog wanting a little bit more. If that makes sense, right? All right. I think I'm going to call this one. Again, I apologize. I've been super busy this week. Been sick, and this was very, very. I'm gonna close out, and then I'm gonna think of all the things I should have talked about when it comes to young dogs. But I'll probably do a second one too. We can talk about that. We can talk more about that. I should probably do a dog aggression one too. Again, which would be a really long live. Hopefully that wouldn't be stemmed with a lot of questions, because then I would at least have an avenue to go with. Maybe we'll do that. I don't know if we'll do that next week. Next Monday, I will be in Buffalo, New York, with, I think, Sarah. I'll be at a dog training seminar. I'm going to a master e-collar program in Buffalo, New York with Mr. Tyler Muto, who is one of my favorite dog trainers, and I'm very excited to meet him and work with him. And I'm going to be a little starstruck, So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the live. We'll see how late it is. I also do have some trainers that I know from other parts of the country that are coming to that too, so we might go out that night. I'm not sure. I will really attempt to do some sort of a live. I might just pop on maybe if I can't do it Monday on a night that I can. We'll see. Okay? I will try to let you guys know, though, beforehand. So if you're around, catch it. If not, maybe it'll just be a short one. See if anybody has any questions or anything, and then I'll jump off. We'll see. All right. So if you like what you heard, please like it. Please share it. If anybody has any further dog training questions, go ahead and leave it in the comments. You can message me on Facebook. You can email me at kelly@gooddogsminnesota.com. If you are interested in dog training, your own personal dog, you can visit my website at Good Dogs, www.gooddogsminnesota.com. Go ahead and send me a message through there. We can get you signed up for a consultation. Right now, I should emphasize I specialize in pet dogs, and right now we're focusing, my biggest focus is young crazy teenagers, doing in-house manners, off-leash obedience control, and I do a lot of dog reactivity stuff too. So, all right. Anything else? I don't think so. All right. You guys have a good night, and I will see you guys next week, hopefully, coming to you from New York. We'll see, though. All right, guys. Have a good one. Maybe a mini session. Sarah said maybe a mini session that includes those other trainers, too. We could. I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe. I think my friend Ava definitely might be up for that. I'll ask her. Maybe we'll just gather a bunch of really common questions and go ahead and take a stab at them. That would be fun. I am, too, looking into software that I can actually have other dog trainers come on here, so we'll split the screen and talk about issues and talk about things. So I'm still kind of working on that. It's a whole new avenue. Technology is not my bag at all, so we'll see. All right, guys, have a good night, and I will see you next week. Bye.